Hello, it is Wednesday, July 8th, 2020, and here in Nowhere Village, we're going to be receiving a teaching on authentic communication, and in particular, I'm going to be speaking about something that I've called the suffering square. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Um, and it's a template for helping us understand when our relationships become inauthentic. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. I'll address a question that Pam put online that I really appreciate. And I also invite questions from everyone who's present. I will remind you in a little bit, in 20 minutes or so, to add your question, but you can add a question really at any time that you like. So I'm celebrating right now an anniversary. 2 years ago, I got married on July 7th of 2018. And a year ago, at the anniversary, the 1 year anniversary of the wedding, I went back and did a ceremony that was an unwedding. And a couple days later, or maybe a couple days before, but right around, I'm basically at the year anniversary of signing the paperwork for the divorce as well. And that was the last time, a year ago was the last time that I went out to this property where, when my partner and I, and now ex-partner, and I found it, I thought, this is where I'm going to be buried. I'm going to live the rest of my days here. And I'm not going to talk too much about this experience today, but I just want to give an update because it feels good. I was anticipating this anniversary possibly being really hard emotionally, and I have been writing out since Monday night, really writing out this really deep sense of sort of peace and completeness. And I've been a little surprised by it, honestly. But I think all along the way, I was really surprised by how painful it was, and surprised by how long it's taken to get to a sense of peace. And I do think that some things really take time. Dukkha is the Sanskrit word for pain. And there are painful experiences in life. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but avoiding the pain, or trying to, as I used to do, trying to pretend that the pain wasn't part of my reality, only works for so long. And I think what I've learned more than anything is how to be comfortable in discomfort, and how we can ride these things out. And we're not really totally in charge of the journey. I just couldn't say how long it was going to take for me to feel that kind of peace. I just couldn't say how I was going to feel when July 7th rolled around. But all these practices that I've been developing, and all of these values that I've been really working hard to show up for every day, I feel their support really deeply. What they don't do is give me control over my journey, or the world, or even the very thoughts that arise in a given moment. but they are teaching me how to be with what arises, whatever that is. And showing up for my values again and again, and really, really going back to what I believe, what I really truly believe. Surrounding myself by others who are also doing their own questioning and doing their own work, and who are really honoring their beliefs. They don't even have to believe the same thing, just to also be a person of integrity. This is the work I've been doing, and it works. It's working. And I spent yesterday really nesting inside my little cottage where I am right now, and really making it feel like home. I really feel at home in this place where I'm only going to be able to live for a few months. And yet I feel a deeper sense of ease than I did at that other property, where I was always worried about where I fit in and if I belonged. And so this brings us to our main topic for today, which is how the way that we engage in relationships can give us the feeling that we are part of the whole, that we are safe, that we belong, that we are seen and we are heard. You know, these things we want from life. How the way that we engage in our relationships can be conducive to that or not. And I always say that meditation practice is, in essence, a relationship practice. We are learning how to relate to our experience. And how else do how do I meet you? Through my experience, right? Everything that I consume happens through my experience. When I produce something and I put it out into the world, I experience the response. And so what meditation does, of course, is helps us to learn how to really inhabit our own experience. In the meditation that we just did, I talk about how if we're going inward, you know, and we're doing our meditation, what's the most frustrating thing that people talk about? Usually it's their own thoughts. And what's the thing that gets in the way when you're trying to have a conversation with someone and really see them and hear them? Your own thoughts. And how it is that we navigate that, how it is that we interact with what we find inside is a pretty good replica of how we react when we find things outside. And I gave the example in the meditation that we just did that if I were trying to go around looking for something difficult to find, and yet I was, you know, walking around like this, looking, it would be difficult to find. But this is exactly what we're doing with our own ideas, our own thoughts, our own stories all the time. Right? So I wonder why you and I can't relate. And yet, meanwhile, I'm just looking at my own manufactured thoughts. And you might be saying, well, but Erin, you said just look at your experience. I'm having an experience of my thoughts. I'm looking at them. Yes. But the way that we're relating to our manufactured thoughts, usually in the Yoga Sutras, they'll call them nirmana chittani, or which means manufactured. Or at the, you know, and more famously at the beginning of the book, he says chitta vritti, because these manufactured thoughts are vritti, which means they're fluctuating all the time. And what's the difference between my manufactured thought and that bird song out there? From the perspective of the meditator, not much. Well, except we could probably do more inquiry work. It's probably riper to do inquiry with the thoughts that we find. We're going to talk about that. But from the perspective of the meditator, we learn how to relate to everything the same. There's the thought, there's the bird song, there's that feeling in my belly. And observe all of it. All of it's holy, all of it's sacred, all of it's in the present, all of it's real. I gave a quote for our silent meditation yesterday about how what's happening in the now has the stamp of reality. And now the difference is in manufactured thoughts, we tend to identify with, right? I'll just speak for myself. I have for my whole life identified as being smart. And so my ideas started to become, and my thoughts, the way that I thought, started to become something that I got attached to. Because I thought, that's Aaron. That's the good version of Aaron. There's also some stuff about Aaron I don't like, and I'm gonna try to do whatever I do to that, suppress it, distract from it. But this is this identity of Aaron that I'm attached to. And so hearing the bird song makes me feel like that belongs to something else. But the thoughts belong to me. And so the difference in how we relate has to do with how we're identifying. It has to do with, because when we identify, that's when we have attachment or aversion, right? Oh my gosh, I can't have that thought, right? I can't have a thought that goes against my identity. A lot of people right now, not being able to acknowledge that they've had racist thoughts, or that they've not, that they've not being able to admit that they're not totally wise and awake and totally understanding of everything. If we look, there's usually some kind of identity, some kind of egoic character that we believe we're supposed to be when we're doing that kind of clinging. And so these nirmana chittani, or chitta vritti, that word chittas, there, both of them, right? That means consciousness. They depend on our attention to keep that going. They're like our little darlings. They're like our little favorites. And as we feed them more and more attention, that relationship becomes less and less free. And it becomes more and more attached. Intertwined, hard to navigate, hard to figure out. A lot of what I hear people talking about is just, I'm confused. I'm confused. And that's true. This world is really strange, and there's a lot going on at any given moment. But this is how we do start to really get some clarity, when we can start to be the witness of our own thoughts and our own stories. So the meditation practice gives us that spaciousness. It's huge. And then for those of us who do inquiry work, which is a lot of what we do at Nowhere Village, we can then go and start to investigate some of what we discovered. And you can investigate the bird song, right? Helen told us about all the beautiful birds that she heard chirping away here when I first arrived on this property. And we can learn a lot about life that way. And if you feel called, anything that arises in your meditation that you feel called to do inquiry on, you can. But for reasons that I'm sure feel clear, you know, the things that we identify with most are going to likely be things that, when we investigate them, lead us to awakening and revelation, an aha moment. So this technique, basic technique we do in meditation of just finding something steady, that's regular, that has the stamp of reality because it's in the present moment. And I come back to it again and again. And then I let that other stuff, I let myself become unattached to the other stuff. That's the basic technique of meditation. And by doing this, you know, by choosing, first of all, we're choosing somewhere else to put our attention, which means we are enhancing our power of choice. We are strengthening our power of attention. I can keep bringing it back and back and back. I can keep it here for longer. And over time, these bonds, it's this confusing intertwining of our identity and our ideas and our feelings, things start to unravel in a good way. And sometimes that unraveling can feel uncomfortable. It can. But there's an unraveling so that we can actually, we get a little space to see ourselves and to see the world. We get to start to see what we're not. I used to believe every thought I thought, which is very confusing because a lot of my thoughts are contradictory, right? So there's the witness, and then there's the whatever it is that's manufacturing thoughts. And eventually we find that, oh, just like my body is, you know, my internal organs are doing what they're doing. It doesn't bother me. And I don't have to stop and go, wait, is that happening in my kidneys? Is that going on in my bloodstream? Eventually the chittavritti, the mental consciousness kind of becomes that as well. And that's a healthier mental consciousness. And then the attention is something of its own. Awareness is something of its own. It's the observer of. So from standing from that place, how do we then go into inquiry work? I often tell people, go ahead and go for what feels poignant, what sometimes feels painful, what's bringing up emotion. Often that's where the inquiry is, right? Meaning if you're in meditation and something comes up and it's bothering you, just note it. Don't try to fix it in meditation necessarily. Note it, and then you can go and do some inquiry with that. If something makes you feel really good, or you have some experience, John Samuel was saying a couple of weeks ago, or maybe just last week, gosh, I just sat down and then I felt like 20 minutes later you rang the bell, and it was great. It was a beautiful meditation and special, you know. When we have experiences, whether we've labeled them good or bad, that feel heightened like that, that's a great place to maybe do a little inquiry. What was that experience that I had? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the suffering square here. For us to have authentic relationships, inside or outside, we have to be able to listen. You have to be, which means we have to be able to be receptive to new information as it arises. And the nature of time is such that every moment is new. The enlightened being is being reborn and dying in every moment. And so something I see a lot in myself, and I don't totally blame myself because we live in a culture where I see it all around, is again that inability to listen to others or listen to new information because we've got the shiny thing that we're just paying so much attention to all the time, which is usually our own thoughts about ourselves, right? Or our own version of reality, our stories about things. And so this listening piece, this receptivity piece is just, we could just talk about this every week forever. I guess in a way we do. But there is something else that is really important for authentic relationships, which is to also be able to express from what we find. And that has its own set of challenges, which maybe I'll speak to a little bit more next week. But what I find is that in these last couple of years since my wedding, as I've gone in this epic odyssey of self-discovery, is that I didn't even really know what my own needs and boundaries were. And so I always thought I was a good communicator because I'm good with words. But I wasn't a good communicator because I wasn't good at listening to myself. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know the new subtle nuances, right? Between this is you're socially burnt out and you just need to go ahead on home right now. Not you need another drink to push through it or something like that, right? I didn't know how to listen to, it's just one, maybe kind of random example, but I didn't know how to listen to the inner information. And I would have whatever idea of what the night should be, so I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to push through. Here's my plan. Okay, my body's giving me all sorts of real-time information about what I need and don't need, and I'm not capable of even listening to it. And so I've learned a great deal about that in the last couple of years, and how beautiful and valuable it is to know how to drop back out of the stories, the identities, and back into the direct communication with the universe, which is guiding us in every moment. And as I've come to trust that, all of these wonderful plans and identities and stories that I had about myself that, like, like that, that has felt like destruction. And now it feels like freedom. So we're going to look at this. We're going to look at this here and what I would like for everyone to be doing. And I'll go ahead and address Pam's question, actually. And maybe I kind of did in the talk in a roundabout way. But Pam was saying, so I gave some inquiry prompts along with this graphic on Monday. And Pam said, I got stuck on that first question where I said, look at these different, so look at this, and I want you to look at this, and then I want you to think about the relationships that you have and see if you can just get a new perspective on the old story. And what I don't mean is for you to go in here and write a fairy tale or write something that doesn't exist. Okay, in this story, I'm the villain and he's the savior. And if what I'm saying is go ahead and look at your real relationship, the relationships as they are, and the stories you've been telling yourself and the characters you have been embodying, and just see if you can use the language that I'm sharing to make it, to have some insights. That's all. But I think it's really, really, really important that we understand the relationship between meditation and inquiry, which I've been speaking of, right? That we understand when it's time to step back and just be in that witness place and just observing, And when it's time to kind of go in and go, okay, this piece, I got to do some inquiry around this piece because it keeps coming up. Or I know that there's something funky here, or it's causing me suffering. Suffering brings us to the work. It is not all bad. Changing our relationship to suffering is something my teacher says is going to be necessary. Okay. Yeah. So don't try to manufacture, right? Don't try to manufacture. The one of my favorite, it's actually two lines from the Yoga Sutras. My favorite sections of the Yoga Sutras. I just had such a breakthrough with this years ago. He says all of our manufactured thoughts come from one thought. I am separate. And then we have other chitta, we have other consciousness that isn't manufactured. That's just naturally arising consciousness. That's a united consciousness, collaborative consciousness. But that experience of the manufactured thoughts, the manipulations, those come when we believe we're separate. Okay, and so this whole square really is about that. The idea being, I renamed this from darling to favorite. I just think it sounds a little better. I don't know. I'm still playing with the words. The words don't matter as much. You get the idea. These are archetypes. These are archetypes that have existed, I don't know how long, but and I made this little axis here where you guys can see that the savior and the villain are the actors. They're the subjects. They do things. The favorite and the victim are receivers. They receive experiences. They happen to them. The dichotomy of good and bad, or good and evil, are here. But of course, what we're really going to find is that in reality, no one is a complete caricature or a complete archetype. We all can experience all the archetypes. We learned that good and bad are actually an illusion. And we talked about that a lot last week, and so I'm not going to go super deep into that, but look at last week's talk if you want to investigate a little bit more about what I mean by good and bad are an illusion, because I talk about how sukha. Okay, so let's bring in this language too, because this is important. So bad, dukkha, is suffering, and usually the victim is identified as the one who experiences dukkha, the one who suffers. Or pain, sorry, I want to use the word pain. Pain has a painful experience. The favorite is the one that's associated with or identifies as I'm the one who has the pleasant experiences, right? Sukha, ease. The villain is defined by being the one that delivers bad. That all, and it's like if you're in the full caricature, right? Everything that person does ever is bad. It's not true. There's no one. There's no one, right? And same with Savior. There's no one who every single thing that they do at every single moment is perfect, right? Unless maybe it's some enlightened being. And so the Savior is defined by being the bringer of the good. But as we saw last week, sukha and dukkha are not actually on two sides of poles. They're a loop. They're a cycle. It's just discomfort in the body and comfort in the body. They come and go all the time. Everybody experiences them. Instead of being a villain, if we start to see, so what the villain brings is apunya. What the villain does is, apunya is really mistakes. It's just making mistakes, and mistakes are a part of life. It's what we all do as we learn. Savior, or the hero, the idealized being, defined by punya. And punya isn't perfection. It's integrity. It's doing something that's in alignment. It's doing a good job. As we talked about last week, I think someone's mowing the lawn. Anyway, this lawn, this might get loud. Okay. As we talked about last week, mistakes and good deeds go together, right? The learning process, the growth process, becoming a person of integrity. What does that involve? It involves seeing through our own stuff, right? It involves having these aha moments, which means that I couldn't have seen it before. So yeah, so more about that on last week's talk, if you want to go deeper into that concept. But what I want to say here is, we have to look at these concepts and see for ourselves where we've been deluding ourselves. And the issue comes with the identifying, right? The issue comes with, if I believe, and I think it would be really interesting also to look at the relationships between, okay, so if I believe that I actually had a hard time seeing myself ever as the victim, right? So my go-to place was usually the savior and the favorite. And I saw them as related, meaning I could be a favorite if I went and saved somebody else. I could also be saved. And so, and I was so averse, my identity was so wrapped up on this good, quote unquote, side, that I still struggle with this. I got to a place where I was so afraid of making a mistake. I was so trying to be perfect all the time that, ironically, I made myself really, really miserable, and those around me miserable too. Because I associated making mistakes with being a villain. When I suffered and I experienced dukkha, I thought it must be because I'm being punished. Right? It's the other thing, that these will end up seeming like a reward punishment system. Not true. Not true. Sukha and dukkha are not rewards and punishment. It's embodied experiences of comfort and discomfort. And then what happens, because of the separateness, because of this square structure, which you don't see this in nature. Next week, we're going to look at a circle, which we do see in nature, on a spiral. But what's happening here is we shove others into these other roles as well. We need somebody to kind of play against. And so instead of a cooperative, holistic circle of life, we end up with these squares and grids and corners, and we end up shoving others into spaces so that we can stand in the space where we feel comfortable. I feel like there's just so much that we can say about this, but I want to open it up to questions. And yeah, and I want these weekly sessions to feel like, yeah, we're just continuing to dig and grow and explore and learn, and none of this is going to be exhaustive. Oh, good. I'm glad it was helpful. I'm just going to say a couple of things here while I wait to see if there's a question that comes in. And I can update. I'm going to update this, adding like a few more things, like adding the, sukha, dukkha, punya, apunya, which basically just means, pleasure, discomfort, integrity, being in alignment, doing good job. And out of integrity, out of alignment, which just means making a mistake. And I'll put in there how it relates to those 4 abodes that we work with sometimes. And hopefully that's all becoming clear, but there's lots of pieces to this. But I would love for you to just investigate these concepts and how you're identifying and how you're getting attached and averse, right? So here's the thing: when you have dichotomies, right? When I got attached to the idea that I'm the hero, I naturally got averse to the villain was created because of this like specialness. This is a perfect person as compared to everybody else. So yeah, the way that these characters create each other and create a world of divisiveness, competition, better, worse. It's not what the ecosystem out here looks like. So investigating these, and I'll put it together so it's a little easier for you to do that, and we'll take that inquiry work into next week as well. But I'm going to go ahead and give you these definitions. Pain, or dukkha, an embodied experience of discomfort. Ease, an embodied experience of comfort. The first one is embodied experience of discomfort. Ease is an embodied experience of comfort. Okay, so as you look at your relationship with pleasure or ease, sukha, and dukkha, pain, notice what your definition of these things are. Very off. So pain is different than suffering. It's a suffering square. Suffering involves some kind of spiritual or psychological element. Right now I'm a little hungry. It doesn't feel like suffering to me because I know it's going to end in a few minutes when I wrap this up and I go have some breakfast. It might be suffering if I never knew if I was going to eat again. See? Also, yeah, so if we believe that all pain is suffering, then we're going to be running away from the discomforts of life, which is just impossible and not very fruitful. Sometimes I also glorify pain, right? Sometimes I look at pain and I go, I'm a really hard worker. That's where I go when I get stressed out. I just work really hard. That's how I make myself feel better. But sometimes it's almost like I'm punishing myself because I think it's going to purify me or something. I don't know. Look at your relationship to dukkha. Ease, right? So often we think of ease as happiness, but it isn't necessarily. I could have a very easeful life and still be in a lot of suffering. I can have a lot of privilege and still feel a lot of dukkha in my world. And sukha is not privilege. It's not something that's earned, right? Privilege is an entitlement to ease, but it's all wrapped up in identity. So looking at that, okay. And then integrity is what I'm calling punya. And how I'm defining that is action in accordance with reality. Might be good to look at that versus perfection. And perfection is really just more what we call golden shadow. Idealization, deification. It's you got a devil who holds all the evil, and you've got God who holds all the good. And then where the heck do we fit in between? Where does the rest of life fit? So looking at that polar. What happens with perfectionism is that we give too much power to the false reality of goodness. And then apunya, right? People who are doing bad things. Okay, we can hold them accountable, but we can also see they are making a mistake. They are out of alignment with reality. Is that evil? right? Is it useful to scapegoat people and to push all the evil of the world and all the ills into their being? Seems like it's giving a whole lot of power to the false reality of badness, and a whole lot of power actually to those that we scapegoat in a weird way. Okay, the fairy ideal from the reading a question from Pam. The fairy tale idea is interesting. It is when the aversion comes up. This idea that I could now actually look at something and see something without blinders is powerful. Right. I see what you're saying. So the inversion comes up, something inside says, no, that couldn't be. Ah, ha, ha. Okay, good. That's a breakthrough. That's been a breakthrough for me too. Yeah, that in the past, I, without even realizing it, I was repressing certain of my own thoughts and feelings if they didn't line up with the stories I had. I can't feel that way about him. I don't like him, right? I made him a villain. Or I can't feel that way about her because I idealized her. It all comes back to these stories that we tell ourselves and these shoulds. Nirmana Chittani, manufactured thoughts, manipulations of what actually is. It's okay. It's normal. We all do it. But what we're learning is life is already good enough. It's enough to be a student of life and be responsive and accepting and receiving and then just responding naturally. We don't have to be the inventor, the controller, the manufacturer of reality. I'm gonna leave it there. We get a nice dive in. As always, there's more to say and more to share, but we'll have to save that for another time. I am going on my retreat. After next week, we have one more week in July together, and then we'll come back together in August. And actually, I'm going to be, make a post about this, but I'm going to be asking any founding members who would like to host an event or two or three, a meditation, or just really anything that you're called to in the last 2 weeks of July. Reach out and let's get you set up to create a little event, and so you guys can maybe spend a little time together while I'm away. And I'll also post my meditation schedule in case you guys want to meditate with me. I mean, I won't be turning on my computer. Will be off for the whole 2 weeks. But you can know that I'm here, and I can know that you're there, and we can be in authentic relationship that way.